All right, guys, welcome to lesson 101, ratio problems involving totals. So we are going to start today on page 528. Make sure you have your pencil and paper and your textbook ready to go through this lesson. Today, what we're going to talk about, we're going to use our ratio boxes that we used a few lessons back, and we're going to add an extra row to those and work through ratio problems with totals. But first, before we get to that, we're going to do our mental math. So make sure you're on page 528. As I read these questions, you are welcome to answer them aloud or just get the answer mentally, and then I will put the answer on the screen for you. So for letter A, the question is 20 times 300. What is 20 times 300? The answer there is 6,000, okay? Letter B, 920 minus 550. What is 920 minus 550? Let's take a second there. It is 370. All right, so good job on those. Letter C, 25% of 100. What is 25% of 100? The answer there is 25. Letter D, $18.99 plus $5.30. $18.99 plus $5.30. The answer is $24.29. $24.29. Letter E, decimals. So we have 3.75 or 3 and 75 hundredths divided by 100. So it's 3.75 divided by 100. And the answer, 0.0375 or 375 10,000ths. So remember, with those sorts of problems, dividing by 100, you just move your decimal place. Letter F, 40 times 25. What is 40 times 25? The answer to that is 1,000. Letter G, which is greater, 1 liter or 500 milliliters? What would be the greater amount? The answer is 1 liter. Okay, because it would take 1,000 milliliters to equal a liter. All right, letter H. Find half of 100 minus 1. Find the square root times 5 plus 1. Find the square root times 3 plus 2 divided by 2. And the answer to that one is 10. All right. Good job on the mental math. All right. This example here in the beginning, so the ratio of boys to girls in a class was 5 to 4. If there were 27 students in the class, how many girls were there? So what you want to do, your first step is to make your ratio box. So on one side you'll have ratio, on the other side you'll have the actual count. Okay, and if you remember, we've actually done this before. We did this a few lessons back, and we really only ever had 2 rows, but now we're going to work with 3 rows because we are including totals. So this is sort of the generic ratio box that you can use for ratio problems involving totals. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to read that statement again, and as I read it, I'm going to start filling out my ratio box. Sorry, it's very sloppy. So the ratio of boys to girls in a class, that means I know I'm talking about boys, I'm talking about girls, so I'm going to label that, was 5 to 4. So since boys is listed first and 5 is listed first, those go together. So boys 5, girls 4. So the ratio of boys to girls in a class was 5 to 4. It's very important that you associate the right term with the right number. If there were 27 students in the class, how many girls were there? So I know there's 27 students total, and that goes in my actual count. So now I'm going to show you how to fill in the rest of your ratio chart. So if you look at your first column where it says ratio, boys 5, girls 4. So in terms of our ratio, our total is 9 because 5 plus 4 is 9. In terms of our actual count, we don't know how many boys there are and we don't know how many girls there are. So we're sort of clueless on this right now. Okay, so far so good. We have our ratio box filled out. Now what we want to do is we're going to use the row we want to complete and the row that is already complete to set up a proportion. So our bottom row, the total row, is complete. So that's going to be part of my proportion. And then look at the question and see what we're trying to solve. We're trying to find out how many girls there are. So we're also going to use the row that is talking about girls. So what you're going to do is you're going to take the numbers from those two rows to set a proportion. So with my top row here, girls, those will become the numerators of my proportion. And my bottom row is going to become the denominators of my proportion. So it's sort of set up like a fraction already. 4 is to 9 as G is to 27. So what we're going to do is we are going to solve this proportion. So does anyone remember how to solve proportions? What do we do? Okay, so to solve a proportion, what you want to do is cross multiply. So I'm going to say 9 times G, which I can just write 9G equals 27 times 4. So 27 times 4. Okay, so now what we have is we have what we call an unknown factor. Remember, that's a term in multiplication. So we have 9 times some number equals 108. So if you don't know this off the top of your head, I want to remind you that to solve for an unknown factor, divide the product by the known factor. So my product is 108. I'm going to divide that by the known factor, which is 9. And I would get that G equals 12. So the solution is that there are 12 girls. Okay, so that's all you have to do. If you would like to double check your answer, put that number back into your proportions and see if it works. So 4 is to 9 as 12 is to 27. How do we check if that works? We cross multiply and see if we get the same number. So if our proportion is true, then our answer is correct. Okay, so your steps are to fill in your ratio box, or draw your ratio box, fill it in according to what you need to know, find a row that is complete, find the row that represents the information you want to find, use those two rows to set up your proportion, and then solve. I wonder if I can draw any more arrows on this page. All right, great. So next we're going to move on and we're going to look at an example. All right. All right, this is the second part to lesson 101. I'm sorry it had to be edited like this just because I had a little issue with my computer. But we are going to look at an example to carry on with our ratio box and how we figure out the actual count and the totals for things. So here's our example. The ratio of football players to band members on the football field was 2 to 5. Altogether, there were 175 football players and band members on the football field. How many football players were there? So we have football players and we have band members, and then I'm going to put total at the bottom here. So football players to band members, the ratio is 2 to 5. So 2 goes with football players, 5 goes with band members. And then if we add up that first column, our total according to our ratio is 7. Then they tell us the actual count altogether is 175. So we need to figure out how many football players there are. So remember to fill out your ratio box as you read it or go back through. Make sure you're associating the right numbers with the right variables. And then we have to find our information. So first of all, let's find a column that's complete, and that would be, or a row rather, a row that's complete, that would be our bottom row. And then we also need to locate the row that's associated with the information we're looking for. We're looking for how many football players there were, so we're going to look at our first row as well. So we are going to take some of these numbers out of here and create a proportion. So we are going to use 2 as our numerator and 7 as our denominator. I get the 2 from here, the 7 from here. And we'll say 2 is to 7 as F is to 175. So that's the proportion that we've created here. All right, so remember, to solve a proportion, you cross multiply. So multiply across equals multiply across 175 times 2. So we are on page 529 if you wanted to follow this at all. So figure out what is 175 times 2. And I know you guys can probably do this in your heads, but I'll give you a second just in case. 350. Okay, so we have 7f equals 350. Remember, to find an unknown factor, divide the product by the known factor. So f equals 50. So that means that there were 50 football players. If you wanted to, you could double check your proportion to make sure it worked out. Is 2 to 7 as 50 is to 175. So what you could do is you could cross multiply. What 7 times 50? Is it equal to 175 times 2? Yes, so we know that we got that example correct. So remember, your steps here are to draw your ratio box, fill it out according to the given information, determine which row represents the information you want to find, and then set up your proportion. All right, so we are going to go through 2 more examples, and I'm going to give you a moment to work on those on your own. So that's the the practice set on page 530. We're just going to do A and B. All right, we're just going to do A and B. So take a moment, draw your ratio box, and then come back and I will go over the answers with you. Okay, hopefully you took the time to do that. If you aren't taking the time to do this work, then you're just hurting yourselves, okay? Because you need to know that you understand this, and the best way to do that is to work the problems and then see if you're getting the correct answer. Okay, so let's draw our little ratio box with our actual count. And then let's go over the problem. Sparrows and crows perched on the wire in a ratio of 5 to 3. So I know that I'm talking about sparrows and crows, and it said my ratio was 5 to 3, so I'm going to fill that out. If the total number of sparrows and crows on the wire was 72, how many crows were there? So I'm going to put a star next to crow as I read that. All right, so let's give some variables here. S is for sparrow, C is for crow, and then my total in my ratio column is 8 because I do 5 plus 3, so that's my total. So hopefully this is what your ratio box looked like. And now you need to set up your proportion. So set it up. You want to look at the information that's filled out totally and the information that we are looking for. So those would be our bottom 2 rows there. And we would set up the proportion 3 is to 8 as C is to 72. So 3 is to 8 as C is to 72. And so what we want to do here is we want to cross multiply in order to solve. So we'll do 72 times 3. 72 times 3 equals 8 times C. All right, so do 72 times 3 and you would have gotten 216 equals 8C. And then remember, to find your unknown factor, you divide your product by your known factor. And I like to draw on this side too, just so we understand why we're allowed to do that. All right, so 216 divided by 8 will give us our number of crows, and that number is 27. So you should have gotten 27 crows for your answer to letter A. All right, letter B. You need to make your ratio box. So ratio, actual count, that's what AC stands for. And then we have 3 rows here. All right, let's read that example. And I know I'm going to write total here. So honestly, this is the first thing you should do. You can draw your ratio box even before you read the question, because then you can fill it out as you read. Raisins and nuts were mixed by weight in a ratio of 2 to 3. So I know we're talking about raisins and nuts in a ratio of 2 to 3. So fill out the information in the order it's given. If 60 ounces of mix were prepared, how many ounces of raisins were used? All right. So I filled out my ratio box as I went. So we have 2 to 3. We'll say R and N. Yikes, that's a bad N. Then our total in this column is 5. So here's my row that's complete, and here's the row that represents the information I need, because the problem asked for the amount of raisins used. So set up your proportion. We're going to say 2 is to 5, because 2 is in the raisin column, 5 is in the total column, as R is to 60. So that's the proportion you should have come up with. And now we can solve by cross multiplying. So 5 times R, 60 times 2. Okay, so 5 times what number equals 120? Remember, we divide the product by the known factor in order to solve for the unknown factor. And R equals 24. So 24, what? Not 24 raisins, but it said for how many ounces of raisins. So you could say 24 ounces or 24 ounces of raisins if you wanted to be really complete with that unit there. Okay, so hopefully that helped you. If you have any questions, please let me know. Your homework is across the top here. It's 1, 4 through 12, 20, 22, 24, 25, and 29. All right, guys, so please let me know if you need help. If you guys need anything whatsoever, just let me know, and I will talk to you guys soon.